Hey, fourth graders. We're going to continue with our lessons in historical fiction. So hopefully by now you've read chapter 6 and 7 in Number the Stars. If you haven't, go back to the two videos and follow along and do a couple jots. Well, 5 jots per chapter. Oops, sorry. On Number the Stars. Today we're going to be talking about theme and determining theme, okay? And specifically in fiction, but more so in historical fiction, we're going to be building on what we learned with Tiger Rising, because this is also fiction, but it's got some kind of nonfiction components in the history. So remember when we read Tiger Rising, when we decided or we interpreted a theme or decided a lesson, we had to understand or interpret certain parts. And the same is going to go for historical fiction. It's fiction in general. So you have to think about your characters, your setting, important objects, the plot, mood, feelings, and parts that connect to each other. So we have developed some of our characters at this point in Number the Stars. We have Anne-Marie and Ellen and their families. We have Kirsty. We have Lise. We have Peter. We have all these kinds of characters, and we're learning in this setting in Copenhagen, Denmark, that the German Nazis are coming in and they are not being nice to Jewish people. So as the plot unfolds, right, in this setting, what's happening is the button shop closes and the Rosens now are afraid because the Germans are relocating people who are Jews. We have learned about a couple of important objects. We read about Peter giving the girls shells, but we had heard that they are rationing food, as well as haven't been able to go to the beach since the Germans have occupied their territory. So it's peculiar that Peter has these shelves. And we learn in chapter 6 about a necklace, a Jewish star, which is symbolic for Jews of their religion, that Anne-Marie was hiding this from the soldiers as they banged on the door to try and take the Jews away. And then, so our plot is starting to develop for this family. They're going into hiding. And then the moods we've gotten on several different occasions and several different scenes are kind of fear and scared. Think about when the girls ran into the soldiers on the street, how scared Anne-Marie and Ellen were, or when in the middle of the night banging on the door as a surprise, there's a feeling of fear. And then we have to always think about how they connect to each other. And this is especially important with theme, that different parts connect to each other, because you have to think back to earlier parts. Because each of these scenes, they give you like a little preview, but all the little pieces together is what helps you connect a theme, okay? So today I want to remind you that once you've paused to develop an interpretation of a book, you need to remember it next time you read the book, right? Those connections of all those pieces together. So what happens earlier to what happens later. Remember to hold on to that idea and develop it some more as you read, and continue to add on your interpretation as you revise it. So with theme, it's not just like a one-shot deal. You have to connect all the different pieces or components to get a theme or to get a lesson that you're learning. And that's really important because your thinking might change as you go along when it comes to theme, and that's okay. So we're going to quickly go over our learning progressions, which is where we're supposed to be in fourth grade, so you guys understand what you need to know about theme. I read asking, what is the story really about? And I come up with tentative ideas that I test as I read on. I have an internalized checklist of what makes a good interpretation, that the theme applies to most of the story, that suggests a life lesson. So like you're constantly checking those objects, those characters, those settings. What I do as a reader, I actually at the beginning of each chapter have a post-it. And on my post-it, I list all the characters. So each time a new character is introduced, I add it to the post-it under a word that says characters. And then I have underneath that important objects, setting, and events. And each time one thing builds in that chapter, I add it there and then I continue reading. So I don't have the best memory all the time, so that helps remind me. So if you find that sometimes you forget parts of the book, having a post at the beginning of each chapter that you can write the major important parts of it, right? The characters, the setting, the events, the important objects. That's good to keep yourself in check and understand, kind of to remember or comprehend the story. I know that often, I'm going to go back to the interpretation and the progression, in the second paragraph. I know often theme becomes most clear at the end, but then I can look back and see the theme traced through other parts, just times when a character makes a decision or realizes something big. So in fourth grade, at this time, in your historical fiction unit, you're supposed to be tracing the different examples from the text to support that theme. And after deciding on a theme, this is supporting thinking with text evidence right over here. After deciding on a theme that is important in a story, I can look back on the story, finding text details from across the text. That's what's so important in fourth grade. Now you guys have to find exact details from the text, and you can use it just like we started to talk about in literary essay, and use it as a quote. Right? Take it from the book using quotation marks and write what the character said, write what the character did. Okay? So just a reminder, a theme is the moral or message or lesson of the author wants you to learn from this story. It's the heart of the story, and it's usually unsaid. You need to interpret it or infer it from the text. So in your brain, you have to think about what you're reading and put it together to understand that lesson. So you can ask yourself, what did the character learn? How did the characters grow or change? What message is the author trying to send? What important part of life is this story about? And here are some common themes. So courage, love, forgiveness, family, hard work, acceptance, being yourself, culture, tradition, teamwork, honesty, equality, hope, friendship, kindness, respect, overcoming challenges, responsibility. And so I'm already starting to kind of clue in and have like a friendship theme in this book, because I see Anne-Marie and Ellen are best friends, and I want to think about that in my lens when I'm reading things. But we're going to continue reading because there's a couple themes that there's not one correct theme, but there's a couple themes that we could come up with, and we're going to come up with a couple together. So I'm going to read this passage right here. They plan to arrest all the Danish Jews. They plan to take them away, and we've been told they may come tonight. I don't understand. Take them where? Her father shook his head. We don't know where, and we don't really know why. They call it relocation. We don't even know what that means. We only know that it is wrong, and it is dangerous, and we must help. Anne-Marie was stunned. She looked at Ellen and saw that her best friend was crying silently. Where are Ellen's parents? We must help them too. We couldn't take all three of them. If the Germans came to search our apartment, it would be clear that the Rosens were here. One person we can hide, not three. So Peter has helped Ellen's parents go elsewhere. We don't know where. Ellen doesn't know either, but they're safe. Ellen sobbed aloud and put her face in her hands. Papa put his arm around her. They're safe, Ellen. I promise you that. You will see them again quite soon. Can you try hard to believe my promise? Ellen hesitated, nodded, and wiped her eyes with, I think it says her sleeve. I have a little thing blocking there. So how were Ellen and Marie affected by the events in this passage? So Ellen's parents are somewhere else. This family has taken in Ellen to protect her. So what could the message of the theme be? I mean, Ellen's crying. They're talking about danger, and it's just really scared. I can come up with a couple themes. One thing is I can come up is that they protect their friends. Peter obviously has Ellen's parents. I don't know much yet, so I can't. Maybe later in the story I can elaborate more on that theme with that. But right now I know they're protecting Ellen, and Anne-Marie is trying to help Ellen through this. What I also know is this is showing how war is really scary. And so kids during war are kind of affected by it, okay? So if we're thinking back, remember the scene from Number the Stars when the soldiers banged on the door at night saying, "Let us in!" They searched for Ellen and her family. Anne-Marie reached for the necklace around Ellen's neck, and she said, "Hold still," and yanked it off. And she held the Star of David in her hand as the soldiers questioned her, and she was hiding that Star of David. And so, she had to think fast for Ellen because she knew that the soldiers didn't like Jews, and if he saw this Jewish star, that they might take Ellen. She's being a really good friend, and really a loyal friend, but she's also, a kid normally wouldn't have to think like that. So children who have to live through war live through scary things, and war makes children grow up early. Oops, sorry guys. I popped through those too fast. Let me just make sure. Yep. Okay, sorry. So when I read chapter 6, I was struck by the part where Mama remembers her dog Trofast. The dog waited for her every afternoon in the same path on the same spot, right? They were talking about visiting Henrik and where Mama grew up, because Mama grew up in the country. Right now they're more in Copenhagen's a city in Denmark, so it's more of a country. And they're talking about going to the country because there's not as many Germans there as in the city. And that the scene is important because it shows that Mama never forgets. Just like the dog when she was growing up, she never forgets anybody she cares about. She doesn't forget her Aunt Gitty and her wonderful flowers or her childhood best friend. I'm sure she remembers her daughter's Lise, but it's very painful to talk about, even though, we haven't talked about it. When I was discussing Number the Stars with someone, she mentioned that the dog's name Trofast means faithful. And so that shows how Anne-Marie and her mother being to Ellen, they're really faithful to their friends. So we continue our discussion about being faithful and taking care of people that you care about. So now as I'm reading further, I'm going to kind of think about that and see if that theme works. And the more I think about it, it does, because I think back, right, chapter 6, they're taking care of Ellen and her family, right? And Peter has hidden the Rosen somewhere. Ellen is staying with Anne-Marie's family, and they're protecting them. And then I think back to other chapters, right? Because the theme can't just be in one chapter. I think back to chapter 3, and the family's discussing the closure of the button shops and their worries about Ellen's family. And Anne-Marie's mother tries to make the girls feel better by saying friends will take care of them. That's what friends do. So I start to see this theme. It's in multiple chapters. So this would be something that I could probably use throughout the book about friends taking care of friends. So we're going to think about friends taking care of friends, and we're going to read this passage, all right? And we're going to try to think about it with the same lens. Papa rubbed his chin for a moment, thinking, I think we must not take the risk of sending you to school today, he said. It is possible that they will look for Jewish children in the schools. Not go to school? Ellen asked in amazement. My parents have always told me that education is the most important thing. Whatever happens, I must get an education. This will only be a vacation, Ellen, for now. Your safety is the most important thing. I'm sure your parents would agree. Papa called Mama in the kitchen, and she came to the doorway with a teacup in her hand and a questioning look on her face. Yes? We must take the girl to Henrik's. You remember what Peter told us? I think today is the day to go to your brother's. Mrs. Johansson nodded. I think you're right, but I will take them. You must stay here. Stay here and let you go alone? Of course not. I wouldn't send you on a dangerous trip alone. Mama put a hand on Papa's arm. If only I go with the girls, it will be safer. So I'm thinking about this in the lens of being faithful and being loyal, and I'm thinking they're going back to Mama's childhood home. They think it's in the country. It's safer. Mama's not just taking Anne-Marie. She's doing this for Ellen. And so she's really being loyal to Ellen. Now, Anne-Marie's going to be out of school. Ellen's going to be out of school. They're all going to leave. And they're going to go somewhere where it's safer. And so it's showing me again that friends are loyal. Okay? So it's really important when you're reading that your theme comes up in multiple parts of the story. Okay? And so I track myself, like I said at the beginning of each chapter, and I also do jots in the chapter. This is going to help you, all right? But you have to stay open to new ideas and that different parts are going to change, and think about what the books are really about. So sometimes when you're reading, your ideas are changing. So you might see a theme in multiple parts, but it changes your thinking a little bit. So these are thought prompts for generating kind of like when you change your mind when you're reading. So like, I might not have thought early in chapter 3 that this book was only about friendship when Mama said with the button shop, don't worry, the friends will take care of her. I might have thought something else, but as you read on, your mind might change. So these are some thought prompts to write on your jots if you do have a change of thought. I used to think, but now I realize. When I first read this, I thought, but now I'm rereading it, I realize. On the surface, this is a story of blank, but I think it's really a story about. Some people think this is a story about, but I think it's really a story about My ideas are blank, about blank, are complicated in a way I think blank, but on the other hand, I also think blank. So these are some, if your mind's changing when you're reading, you can use these. If you kind of have a strong thought on theme, then use that thought on theme. Just as a quick summary, what we've learned so far. When you read analytically, you study parts that clue you into facts, feelings, or setting. Different pieces of the story fit together, the who, what, where, why, when, how, and you have to, at first they might not make sense in the different chapters, but eventually they fit together. So you have to kind of think about that. The character's timeline and historical timeline affect each other. In historical fiction specifically, history affects the characters. If you think about how Anne-Marie and Ellen felt when they ran up to those soldiers, because it was the time they lived in, right? Earlier in their life, they had never had that. Now they do. History affects characters, and then we have realized that a character's perspective is shaped by the times and the roles. Kirsty felt very different about that than they did. Kirsty had never experienced anything but the soldiers being on the street. So the character and who they are and their perspective changes things. I'm going to hop over to this one, lodge big ideas in small moments, small objects, details, and objects. And so far we have the necklace, which symbolizes Ellen's Jewish religion and how scary that is. And eventually this necklace, just like the suitcase in Tiger Rising or the different objects that are repeated, is going to be really significant and have a lot of symbolism. And then today's lesson, you're going to determine a theme, but you have to support them with evidence from across the text. So eventually, a theme is not just one piece of evidence in the text. It's multiple places and multiple chapters. And that's what you guys need to think about when it comes to theme. All right, so today what you're going to be doing is you're going to have an assignment in your Google Classroom about theme, and you are going to be expected